Hello, everyone. Well, welcome to Poindexter Village, and welcome to my oak tree. This tree represents life, and it represents roots, and that's why we're all here today, is to celebrate our roots. But let me welcome all of you that are here. Some of us are just learning about Poindexter, wanting to learn more. Some of us have lived here. Some of us have partied here. I remember the day. But I welcome everyone because it's been a long, long journey. And I'm not sure we knew that this day was actually going to happen. But you know, when you put your faith in the Lord and He says, I have a plan and you're supposed to do so and so and so and so, and you learn to be obedient, and the impossible became possible. And I've not been so nervous. All the meetings I had at the mayor's office and with the council people and council meetings, I am more nervous today because I am so grateful and I'm overwhelmed. And if I quiver and a tear comes, please bear with me. But I welcome everyone. And as I said, I have to say, as I said, praise the Lord that He brought us here today. But we wouldn't be here today on this because it's been such a long journey. We started this project in 2008. And we were concerned about people living here and their conditions. And then we found out that the possibility of losing the village, and that's when the journey really began. But I have to say thank you to every one of you for being here, but I have to thank the Mayor Ginther, for his support. We have to thank all of our council people and our state representatives. And so I know I'm going to miss somebody, and if I miss you, please forgive me. But this project started with the Justice Committee, and we met and worked with the residents. From that, when we found out that the village was the possibility of it being demolished, and we went to work with our community meetings, and the city with Mr. Black, Mr. Black, and the Ohio Historic Connection, Mr. Cook, and we started having meetings, and that is when it became apparent that the federal requirement of a 106 process that had to be implemented in order to demolish a village or a place that could be designated as a historic district. That process created a history committee. Now this will sound like the Bible. This committee begot this committee. And then we got another committee. But that history committee with Baba, and after that history committee was dismissed, we then had a community committee. And we met for 2 years, every Tuesday, at Baba's art gallery to talk about what was happening in our community. We've had the support of the Columbus Landmarks. We've had the support of so many people in the community. I just can't name all of those. But if it weren't for their prayers and their support, that we wouldn't be here today. And I have to mention, if you will indulge me, I have to mention a few people that were on that journey with us. And I know I'm only supposed to talk 3 minutes, and everybody knows that as a historian, 55 minutes can go by real quick. But, there were certain people that kept you in prayer and stayed with you. And I'm one of those fortunate persons that have a minister who has been with us all along. Even when we were demonstrating over at CMHA, she was there. She's been at every function, every meeting, and I would like to acknowledge my pastor, Charlene Watkins. Yes. And then I would like, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Watch it at the post office. But I would like, I'm Rita Smith, and I am the chairperson of the James Preston Poindexter Foundation. And I would like all the members of the board of the James Preston Poindexter Foundation, please stand or make yourself known. Thank you. And as I said, I can start mentioning so many, but from the community group to the legacy group to the group that put on, I hope most of you were able to catch the exhibit, the Poindexter exhibit that was at the Columbus Historic Society that was located in Cosi. I hope most of you got to see that. But that committee, as I said, we had committee that begot committee. But I have to say, 2 years ago, I mentioned to a friend that maybe the Ohio Historic Connection might be interested in this historic site. And Mr. Dillard and I went and met with Mr. Kane, and it's been exactly 2 years ago, September 25th of 2015, and we are so grateful to the Ohio Historic Connection that has decided this story needs to be told, this story needs to be preserved, and has purchased this property and signed the papers this morning. So the 2 years were worth it. And I must say, I started out with Mr. Kane and Anthony Gibbs that helped us pull it together, and it's been a worthwhile journey. It was October 12th, 1940, that Franklin Roosevelt dedicated these buildings. And at that time, they were the symbol of hope and safety for so many persons. It was the end of the Depression, and I'm one of those little Depression babies. And that was when people needed hope, a symbol of hope, and to aspire. And so these buildings were dedicated, and you get to celebrate that 77th anniversary today. And as I said, now I could share and talk forever, but when I thought about what can I say today, and it's really overwhelming because I am so grateful and we have been so blessed. And I could spend time and give you the history of this building and folks that lived here and all of that. And I could give you an overview of the importance of name. And it was named after Reverend James Preston Poindexter. And he, for us, is a model of what we should be. A person of integrity, a person that demanded and received respect from so many, but he was a godly man. And everything we do from this day forward, we need to remember what Reverend Poindexter represented and provided to us. And his example was the standard for this community. This community was meant for people to have affordable housing, safety. Pictures of my children playing in what would be here would have been a courtyard. I could go through all of that history. But with today's situation of there seems to be a drought in terms of understanding history and knowing history and knowing on whose shoulders we stand on. And so in lieu of giving you all that history, I have to think about that day when the president dedicated these buildings to those families. If you could imagine Champion Avenue lined with people. It was a bright Saturday morning, I think, or Friday. But it was a sunny, sunny day when he came and dedicated these buildings. The children from the Ohio Nursery, which is another building we need to preserve, they were here, and I believe he got out of his car and took some extra time because those children and the community had turned out, and it was such a grand celebration. He was providing that hope. He was providing the future that the economic times were going to improve. It was going to be a better day. And we knew when we lived here, I lived here with my babies over on Hawthorne. We knew you had a standard to live here. And you also had to have a job. And you didn't dare mess up because your neighbor would turn you in. Okay? So these buildings today are a little tired, and they're a little worn. But you know, when they were brand new on that dedication day, you know how new things smell good? And the new paint. And it was a joy. It was a joy. But here we are today, and I have to say this, that our community is hurting. Because as the Afro-American community looks around, this was considered the $1 Million Mile. Our children don't know why it was called that. I bet you half of you here don't know why it was called that. But all of the businesses, all of the things that we depended upon, because remember, it was a day of segregation. This was built here. This particular complex was for the Afro-American community. Today, our community is sad. When I came down Long Street, I didn't see any of those buildings. I don't see the fabric of what made this community special. You go up Mount Vernon, all of the 10-cent store. Now, some of you don't even know what a 10-cent store was. But Isley's, the theaters, all of those are gone. So this today is extra special because we're rededicating New Hope. Because when we make a museum in these two buildings, it'll tell the story of our ancestors. It'll tell the story of our community. And it has not, our history has not always been valued or remembered. So thank you for, this process. I wrote God and Country, by the way. And I did write Mr. Bunch at the National Museum in Washington, the new Afro-American History and Cultural Center. And I was telling him about this place. And there is a part of that museum, those that have been fortunate enough to be there or have gone there, will know that they're a part of that museum. They have an exhibit called Place. And he shared with me, as a museum dedicated to documenting, studying, and exhibiting the Afro-American life, art, history, and culture, we recognize the importance of those sacred public places which served as respite places for Afro-Americans during a period of segregation. Place is not just a physical, geographic location, but it is where culture is made and histories and identities are created and recreated. We urge you to continue to advocate for the preservation of these important historic places. That was inspiring and gave me another charge to call another council person. And I do recognize all the council people that are here today. But I always say, now, I tell people, I didn't have any money, I didn't have any political power. All I could say was, if they think if they're ready to tear the buildings down, would you like to see an 80-year-old chained to that tree calling a news conference? That was the only leverage I had. But that tree symbols that this is not about me, and it's probably not about you. It is about our children and our grandchildren. This tree cannot grow without roots. Our children need their roots. They need their history. So we're going to make this a first-class museum and cultural learning center, and it's going to, be in competition with that one in Washington. So you have been very patient with me, and I would love to introduce our accomplished councilwoman, Miss Tyson. But thank you, and I love you all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And, never doubt when a small group of committed people come together, they really do change the world. And so when you think about Miss Rita Smith, and you think about the committee that she just talked about, that she was going to make sure, they were going to make sure that we needed to do everything possible to make sure that we had a museum in this community that focused on African American history. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to every individual that supported Miss Smith in this effort. I will tell you that she was at council at our offices all the time. Director Shoney, I think, is out here in the audience, and she's at Director Shoney's office on the administration, and you really can't tell her no. It's hard to tell her no, But she was on a mission, and we supported that mission. I want to recognize my council colleagues who are here today. I want to recognize Councilmember Jiza Page, Councilmember Michael Stenziano, Councilmember Shannon Hardin, but my also colleagues who could not be here today because they're absolutely supportive of the city supporting this museum. Council President Zach Klein, Council Member Elizabeth Brown is Jiza Page, and I think I've named everybody. Mitchell Brown, I'm so sorry, Councilman Mitchell Brown. And we're all excited to be here in support of the Ohio History Connection and the James Preston Poindexter Foundation. And I'm proud of our city because we recognize a significant accomplishment that will result in the 2 remaining Poindexter Village buildings being transformed into this amazing public history museum. Again, I want to thank Ms. Rita Smith for your leadership for preserving the legacy of James Poindexter in our community. To Mr. Bob Lucas, thank you for staying true to your mission. Spark the discovery of Ohio's stories, embracing the present, sharing the past, and transforming the future. And that's what this is. To Mayor Ginther and my colleagues on council, who certainly understand the importance in investing in our city's neighborhoods, especially on the Near East Side, but for also valuing African American history, which is Columbus history. This occasion was made possible due to partnerships, and you heard Ms. Smith talk about these partnerships. For preserving this site and adding to the fabric of this community, as renowned artist and Columbus native Amina Robinson would say concerning this community. A $1.1 million investment from the mayor. The mayor stepped up for $1 million. And from council, you know, we don't have access to the money that the mayor has, but we wanted to make sure that these buildings were going to have an investment from Columbus City Council, and we put in $100,000. And that demonstrates our commitment to the neighborhood, but also to the dedication, the unity, the willpower of community members who were steadfast in their pursuit to preserve the key elements of Poindexter. 77 years ago today, isn't that amazing? 77 years ago today, the grounds of Poindexter Village was one of the country's first attempts to resolve the issue of affordable housing. Something we are still dedicated to understanding and resolving. Today, we are essentially rededicating this site in honor of Reverend James Poindexter, a minister, a civil rights activist, and the first African American on Columbus City Council. He was a revered black man of many firsts. He paved the way for me and many of my colleagues on Columbus City Council, both past and present, to stand before you today. Our council had the opportunity to recognize Reverend Poindexter a few months ago at a Columbus City Council meeting. The response from his family and community were overwhelming. His impact is still felt by sentiments such as keeping these buildings, which will pay homage to his legacy and the history of this community. The value of a public history museum brings to this, the value that this museum will bring to this community and the city at large will be appreciated well into our future. As a Columbus native, I'm very excited to see the revitalization happening in this community and look forward to formally rededicating this space once it is completed. Thank you very much.
What a great day. What a great day. In the city of Columbus, we get to come together to celebrate. And I do need to thank, mayors can propose whatever they want, but they can't pay for any of it without Columbus City Council. And so having a champion like President Pro Tem Tyson, having Councilmember Hardin, Councilmember Stinziano, Councilmember Page, and the entire team supporting this effort and making it a top priority meant a lot to me, and I know means a lot to you. So I say thank you. I'm excited to see all the activity in this great neighborhood. Folks, returning here that maybe lived here several years ago, folks new to this neighborhood. And it is a tremendous community with great resources. I know this personally because my mother is struggling with early onset dementia and received some great services over here at the adult daycare center over at the Poindexter Center. So I know what this community is all about. And as you all know, my top three priorities are neighborhoods, neighborhoods, neighborhoods. And what a better way to live our values than to recognize, lift up, and invest in our history. Black history is our history. Black history is American history. And black history is Columbus history. We have not always lived up to that. But today we get to start writing a different chapter about this great community. What's happening here at Poindexter is more than a plan for revitalization. It is capturing the history of a place that is a key to this city's great history. We know that in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, the United States witnessed a profound and lasting demographic change called the Great Migration. African Americans left the predominantly rural South, escaping horrific violence, some of the greatest domestic terrorism our country has ever seen, to come to live in northern cities, to take advantage of opportunities in Chicago, Cleveland, and Columbus. Motivated by opportunities for economic and political advancement, and sometimes just safety for their families, African Americans chose places like this city, where they created institutions and social organizations to help overcome the barriers that they faced. I have to acknowledge Rita and her work. 9 years. And Rita, we would not be here today without you. And we thank God for you and all that you have done to make this a reality. 77 years ago today is a great time of celebration and an important chapter in the city's history. This story has had some ups and downs since then, but the city, with our great partners at Council, the Ohio History Connection, CMHA, is committed to revitalizing this property into much needed living space for the neighborhood and a historical museum to make sure we protect, preserve African American history, and to make sure that we are able to tell the story to our children and to our grandchildren. As is true of all great projects in this city, Poindexter has been collaborative. No one person or institution can do it alone. And I know that there are folks out there that I am challenging here today. We oftentimes talk about the Columbus Way because we believe we do public-private partnerships better here than anywhere in America. Well, the city has stepped up. The community has stepped up. I'm calling on our private sector leadership today to step up and invest in this museum to make sure that it is first-rate and reflects the incredible contributions of the African American community to our city. You think of some of the greats, and there are many great people who called Poindexter home. Alex Poindexter, Amina Robinson. I believe this community's first African American anchor of a major news station at 6 and 11, a South Bulldog, Angela Pace. I knew I'd get a bark at her. We are who we are because of places like Poindexter and the residents of Poindexter and the impact that they've made in this community and the contributions they still make today. So let us honor those contributions. Let us live up to those expectations. Let us stand on those shoulders, but do it together to make sure that Poindexter doesn't just remain a critically important part of our past, but our present and our future here together. It is now my honor to introduce our great partner in this work, who has been incredible every step of the way, and we look forward to working together in the future, Mr. Bob Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor. In the future, I'm going to ask to be first. Thank you, Mayor. We truly appreciate your investment and the support of City Council. And thank you, Rita, your foundation, the foundation that has put together to be partners with us is terrific. I'm really humbled to be here today to represent the Ohio History Connection. When I learn of all the work, we've been involved with it for a couple of years, but here you all have been working on it 9, almost 10 years, and I know it's been quite the struggle, and so impressed with what you have accomplished here today. On behalf of Burke Logan, CEO of Ohio History Connection, I'm pleased to be here as part of the program. As our state's public history organization, our mission is to spark discovery in Ohio stories, embrace the present, understand the past, and transform the future. Today is truly a great day for history. Thank you so much for being here. I want to recognize fellow board members who are with us today. Mike Rapp from Cincinnati. Mike, Joe Patchen and Jim Wilson from the Columbus area are here with us today. I also want to recognize U.S. Representative Joyce Beatty's office is represented here today. State Representative Herschel Craig, and thank you to Council President Pro Tem Priscilla Tyson for being here, and the other councilmen who are here as well. I hope we haven't missed anybody, but there's a lot of really great famous people here today who are part of this project, and we're so appreciative of them. You might ask the question, why bring Poindexter Village into Ohio History Connection site system? It's simple. It's an Ohio story that needs to be told. And I'm going to deviate here just for a second. We have a passport program, Ohio History, have 58 sites in it. This will be the 59th site. I encourage you to pick up one of these books. I've visited all of these 58 sites in the last 18 months. It's truly a grand experience. And every time I get the opportunity, I talk to people, I ask them to bring their grandchildren, their kids, neighborhood kids, take them to any of these sites, particularly one like this, and they'll come away with a newfound pride in being part of Ohio and being an Ohioan. Poindexter Village is a story of great migration, as you've heard, and this story is currently underrepresented. As a mid-century public housing is demolished all over this country, these stories and buildings are increasingly at risk. Poindexter Village tells us a relevant story of thousands of African Americans that migrated from the system of segregation in the South to employment opportunities and greater potential for success in northern cities. The Ohio cities of Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati were part of that great migration. These two original buildings allow us to portray the authentic story of the housing developments that were created in many cities to better accommodate families. Across the country, few public housing sites have been preserved to reflect the stirring history of the Great Migration and public housing in its authentic setting. By protecting and preserving this site, the Ohio History Connection and the James Preston Poindexter Foundation will be stewards of the remaining evidence of this history and affirm the importance of recognizing the history of all Ohioans. So what's next? In one building, we aim to create exhibits that explore local, state, and national stories of this great migration. We'll work with the community to tell and preserve these stories. The second building will include community programming as well as apartments furnished at the time to display life in Poindexter Village. As we begin a full assessment of the buildings, we'll develop a plan for the properties, and we'll be seeking your input sooner rather than later. We hope to host a public meeting at the end of November to gather community input, and we'll be asking you to help us with this first step. The Ohio History Connection mission is to spark discovery in Ohio stories, embrace the present, understand the past, and transform the future. This is a truly exciting day as we realize our mission with a great partner like the James Preston Poindexter Foundation. With their leadership, the investment from the City of Columbus, and support from the community, Columbus will bring to light the story of public housing and the story of this community. By doing so, Poindexter Village lives on. Today, we begin to write the next chapter. Thank you so much for being here. This will conclude our program.